Welcome. This session is on how to create great storylines for presentations. Now, whichever profession you are in, it definitely requires you to present something in different scenarios where you will have to present for a proposal, maybe, or you're responding to probably some complaints or issues where you'll also have to make a presentation, or you're providing a problem solving solutions to some problems. Probably you have to make a presentation, or you're pitching for a new idea or an improvement or product or offering. There are various scenarios in each profession that everybody has to do presentations in some form or the other. It could be PowerPoint presentations, or it could be through some documentation, or it could be just verbally you are communicating and presenting, or it could be through emails as well, where you are communicating something and trying to organize the thoughts and provide the updates to somebody. So in all such cases, all you're trying really is to make a great impact with your point of view, your presentation, providing your solutions, etc. And it becomes very important to make that in a very good manner, where you create a great impact in the way you present it. So in this session, we will look at how to create such presentations by effectively coming up with the story of the presentation. Now this has become a very buzzword: create a story. I mean, when you are in a business context, what exactly you are actually trying to tell, right? Stories, everybody says, and everybody probably knows. Stories, all humans connect, very well, because we probably have grown up hearing stories. It is more interesting, it is more engaging, and it is not like you might have sat through some of the presentations where somebody goes through a set of slides with boring bullet points, goes on and on and on, and you must be thinking when it will be ending, right? So those kind of presentations will definitely be boring, and we will not take much interest to sit in such presentations. But if you do not want to create a presentation like that and make an impactful presentation where the audience is engaged, they'll be very interestingly and going through the presentation, understanding it, and following the entire flow of the presentation. Stories are the best way to connect. I think everybody understands this and everybody aligns with this. But the key thing here is, how do you come up with such a storyline for your presentation? Because each context will be different, each scenario will be different, and most of the times it may not really be able to you may think that, okay, how is the flow should be, right? It is not that all the time you can come up with some interesting story. So how do you do that, right? So that will be the question. But for sure, the story definitely creates an impact that all of us know. It creates an impact, powerful impact. Second definitely is it creates engaging audience. And easy flow, right? When you are telling a story, and if the storyline is easily followable, people will follow. If you're having a set of data, facts, figures, and slides, even though you may think that people will follow, most often people may not follow completely. But if you tell a story, people most likely will follow the entire structure, right? So there are many advantages. There's a powerful impact, engaging audience, easy flow, it will be interesting. I mean, we can go on. So these are all benefits of telling a story, right? And I mean, you can just go on and on. Don't want to waste the time. But key thing here is, if we have to, okay, an emotional connect as well, right? You can bring in emotional connect as well through a story. So if we have to make such impact, how do you write a story line, right? So now let's consider, so that's the overall part of why we need to create a story. So now let us have a look at how to actually create a storyline. So as I said in the beginning, it will be helpful for any professional in whichever area they are working on, and in multiple cases, need not be just in presentation, but through in emails, or while you convince somebody, or you verbally communicating somebody, in many such areas. So my hope with this presentation or this session is that you already know how to create a storyline, how to present it, etc. But my hope is that even if you do not know, or even if you know, after going through this session, you may be able to have little more understanding and some ideas that can help you improve your next presentation by at least some percentage better than you probably would have done before. So that's my hope with this presentation. Hope I will succeed in that. So let's get started now. Okay. So now let's consider when exactly you will have to do. Now in a work scenario, when exactly you have to make a presentation? Maybe you are asked to do presentation. So maybe you are asked to give a presentation for some proposal maybe. So there is a request for proposal, let's say. Right? So it could be somebody asking for some kind of a proposal from you or your company, wherever you're working for, or your business, etc. And you are making a proposal for addressing their needs or coming up with some solutions or whatever that may be. So that could be one scenario, and it can come in various different ways, slightly overlapping, but it could be, let's say you are providing some kind of solution to a problem. It could be from the client, it will be from the internal stakeholders from your company, or it may be, the context may be different, but eventually you may be presenting something to provide a solution to a problem. Somebody is facing some challenges and you are providing a solution for it. Okay, it could be sometimes proactive as well. So that could be second scenario. And third scenario is that maybe you are responding to an escalation or a complaint, right? So it's also a form of a presentation where you are telling, okay, what went wrong and why we had to do what we are doing and all of that. But you are making a presentation even in that case. Or there could be some cases where it may be your, let's say, new product offering, or kind of service offering. Let's say not just a product, service offering, or you are selling an idea. Basically, you're coming up with an idea improvement, or idea, or it could be some proactively as well. So basically, you are kind of selling an idea. You are pitching for something new. You are selling something, maybe part of the business development exercise, or you are trying to sell something, or it may be just an improvement idea you want to bring in the organization or with the client, any such cases. So in all such cases, these are some scenarios I am talking about. Okay, so it need not necessarily be a complete list of all the context in which you will have to make a presentation. Definitely this is not not all of it, but to give the idea, in many different cases like these, you will end up making a presentation. So why I am telling about this is, if you notice all of this, one pattern emerges, right, where there is a problem that you are trying to solve, and that's what you are doing through the presentation. We are telling them, okay, this is the situation we are in, and this is a problem, and this is how you can solve it. If you look at request for proposal, where you are the first one, right, where somebody is asking you to provide or come up with a proposal to do something. So in which case there is a situation, there is a challenge or a problem, and now you are giving up a point of view as to how you can solve it, or how you can implement it, or how you can actionize it, right? So that's for the request for proposal. And if you are providing a solution to a problem, it's straightforward. There's a problem, there's a situation, you are trying to come up with an answer and providing a solution for it. Even if you are responding to an escalation, there as well, there is a situation, there is a problem, and there is an action or the solution that you are going to provide. And even in the selling case as well in the fourth case. So the clear cut formula for coming up with this kind of a storyline, which is an already known storyline, more formally put, it is called SCQA framework or SCR framework. S stands for situation. C, before going to C, situation is you are going to explain what exactly is the current situation where we are, be it for a client, be it for whatever the context that you are referring to, as is state, that is the situation. Now you are talking about C or the complication. So basically, if you think about it, you say, okay, this is how we are, but there is a problem. Now there's always a but, there's a challenge, there's a problem. So that is the complication that you are talking about. And there is a question as to how to solve it. And there is an A, which is an answer, which is a solution to that problem. Sometimes you put question and answers together as well, or you can call it as result, right? SCQA or SCR. Or complication, or let's say result or solution. Okay, so there is a situation, there is a complication in that, and you are coming up with a solution, or how, by implementing what you are telling to do, what will be the result that you gain. So that is SCQA framework. So let me put it in caps, framework, or even called SCR framework. That's really is the crux of how you want to build that story. It's just a very high level, right, where you are saying this is the situation and this is the complication in that situation and this is the solution that you are coming up. So if you take any such examples, that's how you can come up with the storyline, right? Now let's take one example, but before taking an example, so what we need to understand is that coming up with this kind of a flow usually requires a lot of thinking, data gathering, and all of that. So what can be done is, before you directly start writing a storyline, spend some time thinking about it with pen and paper, just thinking about it, because I feel that thinking about certain things are underrated, because more you put thoughts into it, then the messages starts coming out like a cream coming out of yogurt or something, right? So it's a clear-cut message which comes out, because eventually in the presentation what we are trying to do is to convey the message, what exactly you are trying to tell, right? So because most of the time what happens is you present something, you say something, for the audience is like, okay, so what, right? So what becomes a key point for the audience. So you need to be very clear as to say why we are doing something, why you are saying something you are saying, right? So there has to be a clear-cut understanding as well as reasoning behind what you are saying. So what becomes very important. So to come to that, how to come up with that becomes very important, and that's where the thinking, spending time thinking about that problem. Okay, what really is it? What exactly we can come up with, and writing down multiple different options, scenarios, what can be done, what cannot be done, and how it can be done. All of that gives a lot of value in coming up with a good story. So that's when you can start writing the storyline. Okay, so now let's take one example, not any particular industry or an example, but it's a generically I'll just explain generically how you can go about it, be it request for a proposal or providing any solution to a problem, or responding for an escalation, or business development thing where you are offering a pitch for a new product offering or service offering, whatever it is, right? So essentially first you come up with a situation, right? So if I may write right here, Yeah, famous show. So all mainly, let's first think about this flow in a PowerPoint slides. You have, let's say, 8 or 9 slides in a slide deck presentation. How will you go with the first slide, second slide, third slide, like that, and then create a storyline, right? So if you think from that perspective, right? So one sec. Yeah. So first you come up with a introduction or a context, right? So when you say introduction, here is where you say the situation, right? What is the situation where we are currently? The company is doing so and so, so and so, so and so, and this is what is the problem. Before you come to that, you say the situation. What we, let's say it's a company manufactures so and so products, or it sells so and so services, and this is operating in such a context, such a level, and all of that. You give the introduction just about the current as is situations. You have not arrived to the problem yet, right? So that's the introduction slide, let's say. And now you go to the next one, which is your problem or the complication, whatever you call it, right? So problem. Okay, so problem, here you are going to tell company is doing so and so, so and so, but something has happened or something has changed which caused or posed a new challenge which needs to be addressed. So that's the problem slide where you articulate saying that, okay, in this situation this problem has occurred or this challenge has arisen, for which through this slide presentation we are providing how to solve it, and that comes as the next proposed solution. We go to next or proposed solution. Okay, so in first introduction slide, now the problem slide, now the solution slide. So introduction and problem slides are straightforward in the sense that you know the introduction, probably audience is also already aware of it. Problem you are articulating to make sure that audience is on the same page as you and your understanding is on the same wavelength as them, and if there are any gaps in understanding that can be filled up and all of that. But these are relatively simple slides in the sense that you don't have to go into too much details in it. But when you come to the solution part of it, here is where you might have to articulate. So for example, the solution may contain a lot of details within it, and this is where you apply the pyramid principle, similar to SEQ framework. The second most important part here is that you apply the pyramid principle, where you say, okay, this solution can have 3 different type of solutions, right? So it could be option 1, option 2, and option 3. Option 1, option 2, option 3. So this problem can be solved in 3 different ways. That's what we are trying to tell. And then you detail out saying that what this option is all about, how are you going to address that problem, what are the prerequisites for it, what it really means to the organization and to the people, how do they really see the benefit from it. So you give all the details of each particular options. You could call it out as pros and cons with each of the options, and also tell them about the benefits they are going to get it, all of that. So you are initially giving the introduction and the problem and the solution in 3 different options, providing the pros and cons, and in certain cases when it is really required, you could always go to a level where you tell about the recommendation, that why do you recommend one particular option out of the 3 and why, right? So the reason behind the recommendation that you are proposing in that particular option, right? And obviously after you make the presentation and make the clarity, and then finally you could have one slide for next steps or subsequent actions that has to be done as a follow-up after this presentation. So it makes it a complete story. So a person sitting in the room looking at your presentation will clearly understand, okay, this is my problem, or this is the current situation, this is my problem, this is how we are going to resolve it, I resolving this is what I'm going to get it, and this is why, and what happened next. So that complete flow from starting with the problem to the solution, multiple different options, pros and cons in each of the options, the recommended option which the audience can think about it, and the next steps. Right? This may be one flow. Now let's consider this example of request for a proposal. Right? So if a client has asked for a proposal that you are going back with a presentation to fulfill that particular need, the client will understand the introduction definitely, because it gives very much clarity as to the understanding from your side as to the overall context of the requirement, which client expects you to be aware completely. So that comes a very important aspect. And then the problem or the challenge or the requirement that you're addressing, and then the proposed solution. It could be much detailed, but essentially that's how the client will see it, and the recommended option as to why it is so. So now this can be applied in any other cases. If, for example, it's a new product offering and you are probably pitching something as a new idea or a selling proposition to the client or customer or somebody, then also you are telling them, even if they are not aware, the current challenges that probably they should be aware, and you are giving them the facts, figures, data, input, so that they understand what is the problem if they are not. And then you're also suggesting an idea to improve that or resolve that problem. So that way you conclude the story. Okay, they can visualize it, and you probably use some more storytelling techniques inside the presentation where you can make it more visual, and they can connect with the idea or data that you are mentioning about. You can also show real life examples, day on a life of somebody in that organization, or really what has happened in the past, certain scenarios you can take and explain the details. So all such are part of the content which goes within the presentation that I'm not covering in this session, because that's part of the presentation, and here we are only talking about the high level storyline, how to build it. But if you build a storyline around this, you can add those story telling techniques within the slide decks to make even more impactful story. Okay, so that storyline eventually becomes a very easy flow for the audience to get it and understand. So only two principles that we have talked about is SCQA framework or SCR, whatever framework you call it, where you go through situation, complication, and a solution, and the pyramid principle, where you break down the key idea or the main idea into multiple small ideas and convey the message. Now here is one tip when you are coming up with the storyline, right? If you think of this as slides, now if you look at this picture here, you are having 1, 2, 3. Introduction is one slide, probably this is first slide, right? This is second slide, this is a third slide, and these are sub slides of 3. So 4, 5, 6, and recommendation is 7. Next steps is 8, probably, right? You're talking about a slide deck in in 8 different slides. Depending on the details that is required for solution, it may be a little bit more, 1 or 2 slides extra or more. But essentially this is the flow that we are talking about. So if this is the flow, and you are conveying the message, the key tip here is each of these slides need to have the titles which are self-conveying messages, or the titles which convey the messages very directly. Because what happens is, sometimes people may not have time to sit in a presentation. Sometimes what happens, you just end up sending the slide decks, and people may not have really the time to go through the details within the slide deck, what is being called out. If you arrange the titles of each slides, the title itself, the heading itself, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, these 8, if you consider as 8 different bullet points, right? If you think it like that. So say first one is the introduction, the title, and then the second one, and then the third one, like that. So if you write the title of these slides, and if you go through those 8 points, does that 8-point listing cover the key or core message that you are trying to convey to the audience? So that's what you need to look into. And if it is not the case, the titles have to be edited or modified to convey that kind of a message. So that's a very important tip, because if you consider some busy executives or people in a leadership position, then it becomes very important to have such a clarity in the action titles itself, so that the entire message comes through in a flash of a second when you just go through the title action titles of each particular slides. So that is an important tip. And when you are actually coming up with the storyline, you could do a storyboarding, or you could just simply write it down on a pen and paper and see, or you can put it even in the sticky notes, so you can rearrange the slides in a slightly different way or come up with some alternates. So this is where thinking goes, or thinking becomes a very important part of how impactful your presentation can come out. More you apply thinking, more creative you can be in conveying that message. It becomes a more impactful presentation. But you need to have this kind of a framework in mind, so that you come up with that kind of flow. Because you would have the data, you will have the narrative, everything in your mind, but unless you put it very clearly, thinking about it more deeply, the storyline may not come out well. And most of the times people make the mistake of not thinking through the storyline and just putting together 4 or 5 slides with just data, facts and figures, which may have the important information, but we're not coming up with this like a simple flow. Okay, this is what is the state, this is what happened, and this is why, because of why we have to do this, and this is how we are going to do it. So that kind of a flow, if you bring it to the in the presentation, it becomes even more engaging for anybody to follow. It would not be boring, because we are all adapt to follow the story, and if you go in a flow, definitely people can follow. So the few tips that I talked about, one is that think. I can't stress much more than I have already told about, but I think this is the most important part, right? So more you put your thinking cap and come up with some ideas to how to build a good story, this may not come out that well. So set aside some time, clear time, thinking about it, set aside, right? Thinking becomes a very important aspect, right? And you couldn't say, I would even say, write it down, write on paper, pen and paper, right? Because more you write it down, thoughts become even more clear, and that's when the actually thinking also happens sometimes, right? So not you are actually thinking on paper. It's not like writing, just writing, right? It's thinking on paper. So writing is one of the best ways to think. So and you can say post-it notes also, because the advantage over here is that you can just easily rearrange this notes and see if this flow comes in a very linear flow, people can understand and all of that. So you can use post-it notes as well, and take out any title which is very generic and create into some action title, right? So what I mean by action title is that you say that, okay, by doing so and so, we talked about 3 options for a solution, right? By doing so and so, this improves by 30%, for example. You give the facts and figures, and anybody can understand the context and the details behind that slide, right? If you just by looking at the slide, what message exactly you are telling, that by doing so and so, your company profits will increase by 30% in a year on year. So that's a very clear cut message. Or you can say in a context saying that, okay, by applying this particular architecture to a solution, you are going to reduce the infrastructure spend by let's say 25%. Okay. Or similar to that, I mean, I don't have to go to the specifics of anything, but the point here is, more you write such clear cut messages as an action title for each of these slides, as a heading for these slides, then that becomes a more important for anybody who is busy to have a slide deck very quickly and still get the message. So that is another tip. And my fifth tip is nothing to do with writing the storyline itself, but the tip is that these principles you can apply in day-to-day conversations, emails, conversations, persuasion. Because when there is a data flow, facts, and the reasoning involved, you are trying to really convince somebody for something. So you can apply in such conversations for persuasion. So all you're trying to tell is to convey the message very simply, effectively, in a structured manner. So that's what we're doing with the storyline. So use it in emails. When you're writing an email as a response to somebody, break it into 3 sections. One is, this is the situation, this is the complication, and this is what the solution that you are proposing. Not necessarily all the time you follow that structure only, because in the business emails communication, sometimes you have to give the solutions in the beginning itself because people are busy. But you can think in these terms to structure your thoughts to come up with an email. So the idea is simple, but if you can utilize it in a multiple different contexts in your day-to-day work life. So that's what's the point here. Okay, so yeah, so those are some of the tips how you can come up with the action title, post-it notes you can use, write on pen and paper, and definitely set aside some time thinking about it to come up with a story. Otherwise what happens is you just randomly go with some slides. Even though you may think that you have all the data and information, it will not convey the complete message. And because once you start putting thinking cap and writing, right, you start thinking about what is the need from the audience, from their perspective rather than your own. Because once you start thinking your cap, put your thinking cap and think about the audience. What do they need? What is their requirement? It's all about the audience part, not from your side, right? So that's when you can come up with ideas, the messages, and the point which resonates with the audience, and it's going to be more engaging for them. And you definitely can convey it in a way where it is emotionally connected as well with the audience, so your message goes through very effectively. Alright, I think that was how I wanted to share something, how to create a storyline. Just a quick recap. We thought we started off as to understand what is the need for having a story in your presentation in different contexts as well, and then what are different scenarios in which you have to come up with the presentation, just for identifying purpose. In no way this is the entire list, but to get some sense in which all cases we will have to. And 2 frameworks that we have seen is SCQA framework, where you come up with situation, complication, and question and answer or a solution. And also, I did not write it down here, but we spoke about in the section where we talked about multiple options. That is the pyramid principle, where you have main idea which you substantiate with sub ideas. 1 sub idea, 2 sub idea, 3, right? So that's what is the pyramid principle, where each one you have a pyramid. If I draw it for simplicity, right? So if I draw it, you have I'll just show you here. So you have pyramid principle. Okay, you have a main idea, Then you have another idea which is a sub idea. This is another idea, and this is another idea. So that's what this is a main idea. This is sub idea 1, sub idea 2, sub idea 3. So that's what we are talking about, right? So the pyramid principle, that we can, each slide can have multiple sub slides within it, and that conveys the overall message completely. So these two framework we saw, how we can think about it and try to come up with the flow of your slides. We also saw one simple example which you can apply in any different situation, where you come up with the introduction slide and the problem slide and the solution slides, maybe sub slides within it, or sub slides, or some more sub slides, more than one sub slide. And then you also give a recommendation and say why you are giving that recommendation in the next step. This is a simple flow. You can be innovative and creative in multiple different ways, but you get the gist of it. Like you're trying to come up with a story line. Usually when you say story, there has to be some complication, otherwise there is no story, right? So that's what you are trying to say. This is a complication, and that is how you can now overcome, because in all the stories everything happens, life goes through well, but that something happens, some problem happens, some complication happens, and then somebody comes and solves the problem, and everything goes on in the life happy. So that's kind of a storyline we are coming up in this presentation. And we also saw about the tips which we can apply while coming up with the storylines, and as well as making the overall presentation much more impactful and thoughtful, right? So that's all for this session. I hope this was in some sense useful. If you have not given so much thought in coming up with the storyline even before you started writing your slides, my hope is that you do so, set aside some time to think about it, and directly not jump on the slide creation itself, so that you can come up with something good storyline, and check as well as to how the storyline comes after you write it down, and modify it to make it a little bit more effective. And I hope that it adds a little bit of percentage improvement in your way you make the presentations in your next presentation. That's all for now. Thank you for watching.